an incredible honor for me today to host our incredible guest, Marybeth Bohn from Christina Bohn Foundation in Missouri, USA, who is a vice president and co-founder of this foundation. Hello, Marybeth. I'm very happy to host you, to have you here.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me today.
I already know that it will be a valuable interview, but let me start with my first question. How would you define with your own words, what is PMDD? What symptoms would you list?
Well, PMDD is a mood disorder, and the way it's usually separated from other mood disorders is that it's happening in the luteal phase of a woman's menstrual cycle. Now, if you had asked me 5 years ago, what is a luteal phase? I couldn't have told you. We were never taught about menstrual cycles when I was in school, other than that we would get our periods. So the luteal phase is the 2 weeks before your monthly period. So it happens between ovulation and the onset of your period. So with that comes symptoms. So PMDD brings symptoms of mood swings, feeling suddenly sad or tearful, or you might have increased sensitivity. You could be easily offended. You could get angry more easily. You could have irritability. You could have increased interpersonal conflict. So you're just not getting along with someone. Um, there's a saying in the United States, and it's like, if a conversation goes sideways, and you might be thinking, what just happened? What did I say? Why is she so upset? But this is what the luteal phase does. It can, you and I have talked about this before. It's kind of like having a foreign hacker taking over that person's brain for those 2 weeks, or maybe just a week. It can be a week or it could be 2 weeks. But you don't know where this foreign hacker is to stop the invasion, to stop that takeover. Somebody could be very depressed. They could feel hopeless. They could have negative thoughts, self-depreciating thoughts. So they could be thinking, I'm a burden. My children deserve a better mother than I am. People at my work must think I'm the most incompetent person here. Nobody likes me. I don't have any friends. They could have anxiety, tension. They could feel keyed up and on edge. They could have panic attacks. Then those are the core symptoms. And you need to have at least one of those core symptoms. And then other symptoms, so for a total of 5 total. So you don't have to have all of these symptoms, but for a total of 5, decreased interest in usual activities, unable to concentrate or focus, and that's called brain fog, lethargy, lack of energy, change in appetite. You could be overeating or having certain cravings. You could be sneaking food because you feel like you shouldn't be eating so much in front of your family. You could have hypersomnia where you're sleeping too much, or insomnia where you wake up and you can't go back to sleep, or you can't even fall asleep. You could have feelings of overwhelm. You could feel totally out of control. You could have the physical symptoms that you recognize with PMS too, like the breast tenderness. You could still have the cramps, the swelling. With PMDD, I would think that joint or muscle pain is worse. And then bloating, weight gain. So those are the general symptoms. And the way you find out if you have PMDD is you need to track for a couple of months at least, and track every day with your moods and your period, and go through the whole menstrual cycle. So like if your cycle is 28 days, track 2 months at 28 days, whatever it is. And then see if you have your symptoms only happening in that short window of time. And then, of course, there are those exceptions, because some women can tell that they are bleeding before they even go to the bathroom because the symptoms have lifted and they have that relief. But for others, it takes a few days into their periods. And for others, I'm sorry to say, sometimes people are waiting until the bleeding absolutely stops before they get that relief. So there are different variations of PMDD.
And unfortunately, as a PMDD warrior myself, I have to admit that this list sounds very, very familiar. Are there any myths maybe that you may have encountered about PMDD?
Oh Yes. Okay. So the myth that I find the most offensive is that it's not a thing. It's not real. There are still people today, even though this argument was settled a long time ago, before it was ever put in what we call the Diagnostic Statistical Manual that the field of psychiatry and psychology uses that book. And so the DSM-5 was published in 2013. Before that time, there were people who were fighting having PMDD in there with the diagnostic code because they just felt like it was big pharma and male doctors holding women back, elevating PMS to a medical problem to keep them down. And that's not true. That not true at all. So that to me is by far the most damaging myth to say it's not real. And that would be a terrible accusation to say to somebody who is truly suffering with this. And then the other thing would be if you go to a doctor who doesn't know what it is, and female gynecologists can be guilty of this. That is, oh, honey, we all have PMS, and just treating you dismissively and I'll see you next year. That's not enough. That's not good enough.
Mhm. Sometimes PMDD is listed next to a disorder called PME. How can you say we can differentiate it?
Okay, so PME is premenstrual exacerbation, and that's the increase of symptoms of something that you have all month long. But during that luteal phase, those symptoms get worse and they can be harder to treat. So you might have a prescription for an antidepressant that works well in your follicular phase in the other 2 weeks of the month, but in your luteal phase, it might not be enough. And so you might need to increase the dose or you might need to add something else. Um, it could be a migraine disorder. Like for me, for example, I'm sure I had PME because I had a migraine disorder all month long, but it would get worse before my period. And I had a totally different prescription to try to knock out those migraines before my period. And so you can find that out by tracking. And, because there are some who are sure they have PMDD only to find out they really have PME. And that's, it's great to find out. The thing about PME is it doesn't have a diagnostic code yet. It has a research code. But PME, even without a name, I think everybody's known this forever, that for decades. Because even when I was seeing my doctors in the 1980s and 1990s for the migraines, I would be asked, do they get worse before your period? And I'd say yes, or I would say it. I knew this because I kept a little book calendar where I would mark, how many headaches I was having through the month, and I had different symbols for a regular headache versus a migraine headache. And then I'd have my big X for when my period started. And boy, there were a lot of migraines and the capital M's on those little days before that X happened. And so, we all know it exists. So I don't think it's difficult for a doctor to work with you to deal with PME and to prescribe you different medications or an increase of medications during that time.
In all these cases that you've mentioned, tracking is key, actually. Would you say
Yeah.
that tracking amongst the women or you may have heard of, is it common?
Well, in the United States, it is because there's so many period tracking apps. So even for me, when Christina was home with us, I didn't see her menstruate at home because she was always menstruating in the hospital. We were getting her to the hospital in crisis before her period would start. So we weren't connecting it. And Christina wasn't reporting that her periods were starting in the hospital. So nobody was charting it. But I remember when I finally figured out what she had 9 months after she'd been with us, I had this flashback of her always updating her period tracking app whenever I had hand her cell phone in the car. And that tracking apps like that didn't exist. I didn't have a cell phone. We didn't get cell phones until many years later. So I would just get this little calendar book at a card shop. We have Hallmark card shops, and they always gave out these little books. And so year after year, I still have them. I've got these little calendar books in my closet of my tracking my migraines and my periods. So if somebody doesn't do that, it's a good idea to start tracking. And they have really great apps these days. But it's really important not just to track when your period starts, but to track your moods and do it every day and see if you're noticing headaches, aches and pains, all of this. And I don't know because I've never had a period tracking app. I maybe you could tell me. Do they have a place where you're supposed to put all this? And do you just check little boxes, or what does it look like? I don't know.
Yeah. That they looks like similarly, like, as you mentioned. You put all these boxes. If you have a specific one, as I'm using the Bell app, I'm sure you're familiar
Huh?
with.
Yes, yes.
You're having very helpful tools over there. So you're marking everything. You even can add the context. I mean, if you had enough water or
Oh,
enough sun this day, so that's very helpful. You are just
oh,
taking.
that's very user friendly. That's nice to hear about that. Yeah. Because I'm older now, so that hasn't been something I've needed to do since all these apps came around.
I get it. But we recommend tracking for sure for everyone, not only if you are starting a family.
100%.
That's something we should highlight, right?
Absolutely. Hmm.
Alrighty. So you've already mentioned your daughter Christina, and before we proceed, I would like us to talk a little bit about her. Could you tell us about her a little? Could you describe her as a
Yeah.
person?
Yeah.
That would
Well, Christina was a love. She died on November 3rd, 2021 at age 33 because of PMDD. Because PMDD can make a woman suicidal, and 72% will have suicidal ideation, 49% will plan, and 34% will attempt. And Christina had not lived with us or near us in many years. So, to give you an idea, when she's a little girl, she's just such a sweet little girl and very imaginative. She had a beautiful voice and she loved to sing for her school classes. And the kids would ask her to sing for them. I mean, I, I can't even begin to describe because I'm not exaggerating. She had this voice that was very soothing, and even in first grade, second grade, these little boys would be saying, Christina, will you go up to the front and sing for us? And the teacher would let her. And so there's just something about her. And then she loved school, and so did our other daughter, Marissa. So we 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 never had to encourage our girls to do homework or remind them about anything because school was our thing. They just really loved it and they were good at it. And so Steve and I always knew we were very fortunate parents because besides that, they were just involved in things and they were doing good things. They were good girls. Um, so Christina had a lot of admirers, and she was honest and didn't cheat in school. And so then when she graduated from high school, she spoke at our high school graduation. She was what's called the salutatorian. We have one valedictorian, one salutatorian. So valedictorian is first place. She was second place. But her GPA, that means her grade point average, was still higher than all the valedictorians in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex in Texas, where we raised our girls. And so it's just that there was this extraordinary young man who was just above her at her school. But so she spoke at her high school graduation, and there's one boy who was just 1/100th of a point behind her in his GPA. And he said, Christina, the only reason why I can cope with this is because I know you never cheated. Because she was just so honest. Yeah. And she participated, she was in choir and she went to state for her voice as a soloist. And she played tennis. And she and I used to run 5Ks together when she was little. We did 17 together. And then my back started going out and having problems. So I had to stop, but she could keep going. And so she did a couple 10Ks with her friends at college. And um, so that's why we'll talk more later about the 5K.
Mhm.
But then Christina went away to college, and she uh, taught economics labs while she was in nurse. She got into the nursing program. And then she also did research for the nursing program at her university. She also went on a full ride scholarship. So all her schooling was paid for. Um, and then um, she graduated valedictorian and she became a thoracic ICU nurse. Now, I wouldn't know for a couple more years that she was having problems with depression and anxiety because she could hide symptoms really well. And she just thought everybody felt this way. And so when she graduated, she did have a problem within a few months after graduating because I was surprised she came home to us. to live with us, but my husband and I were moving away. So our house was for sale, and she had just started her first job as a cardiac care nurse. And I did see some evenings where she was concerned, like worried about how she was doing on the job. I saw a lot of anxiety, and it didn't make sense to me because she normally had confidence. So in front of me, she was starting to show symptoms, but I didn't know. So I even invited somebody over to our house to talk to her, one of our good friends. He's an employer, and to put her fears to rest. And then we have a friend who is a doctor who would talk to her about how her days went. And he gave her little tips. Like he said, Christina, if you ever catch this with a patient, you'll be the hero, because a lot of nurses don't know to catch this as she's working with cardiac patient. And so one day she did, she caught that. And one time she asked her supervisor, she said, I just have a lot of anxiety. I'm really nervous. I'm so worried what you guys think of me and think I must be terrible. And she said, actually, no, Christina. We were just saying that we wish we could clone you. We wish we had 10 Christinas. So she's feeling bad about herself, and other people are loving her. So you probably understand what I'm saying, right? With here we are seeing PMDD starting to gradually manifest, and we didn't know it. And if only we had caught it earlier, because I know that there were always tears before her period started, but if only we had known back then, because once we finally figured it out, it was 11 years later. And then she figured she probably had it for 15 years, but she could mask her symptoms. And it wasn't until she got married and then had her 2 babies, and she wasn't working anymore. But the second pregnancy, she had perinatal depression. So that meant that she was depressed while pregnant and then depressed after pregnancy. So that's called postpartum depression. And there's a link to PMDD with that. And the first pregnancy, she felt great. She told me, she said, I felt like my depression and anxiety went into remission. But all I was ever hearing occasionally were the 2 words depression and anxiety. I wasn't hearing about other symptoms. So then over the years, sometimes she would seem overwhelmed. And like she came to our house one time for Christmas with her family, and she was really annoyed that we were having company on Christmas Eve. But we always had company on Christmas Eve. But this time she was upset about it. But and Christina's nature is she wasn't a screamer, but she told me that she was annoyed. And so I took it to heart, because I thought, well, because you live so far away, it's fair. I won't invite any more people anymore. And so I just stopped inviting company over at Christmas time. And anytime that she was there, we just stopped having company, because I didn't want to make her upset, because she said, you don't see us that often because we live so far away. So see, we went all those years without her living in our home. So we weren't seeing everything. And then it wasn't until shortly before she came home to us, and this would be 2020. She went to the hospital on her birthday, October 2nd, 2020. And what was puzzling me was in the week leading up to that time, I would ask her what she wanted for her birthday, and she was not interested in it. And she'd say, I just don't need anything. I don't want anything. And I'd say, why are you so blue? What's the matter? And she couldn't really tell me. But so then on her birthday, she took herself to the hospital to be admitted because she felt suicidal. And then in the morning, she woke up and she told the nurse practitioner in the behavioral health unit, her words were, I feel so much better now. I started my period in the night. Can I go home? And the nurse practitioner didn't catch it. She obviously didn't know about PMDD. Christina didn't know about PMDD. Christina graduated in 2010 from nursing school, and PMDD didn't land in the code book for psychiatrists, which is called the DSM, until 2013. But even though it was in since 2013 and we're now living in 2025, that's still recent when you consider how many thousands and thousands of diagnostic codes there are. So unless a doctor is exposed to PMDD somehow through either a faculty meeting or a session at a conference or an article that they have time to read, and they have to try to make time to read articles, these published manuscripts and peer-reviewed journals, when are they going to know about it? We have to give them a little bit of grace. There's no way to know about everything. That's why awareness like what you're doing and awareness like other people who have PMDD are doing or our foundation is doing, it's so important because at least we're kind of ringing the bell saying, hello, there's PMDD, please consider it. So it was completely missed. And that nurse practitioner told Christina, I've reviewed all your records. I've seen everything you've tried. A long list of prescriptions. And I have her list since between 2017 and 2021. And when doctors see this list, they usually ask me for a copy of it because it blows their minds. They just can't believe how many things she tried. And then she also tried different forms of therapy. And she tried TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. And and that was a long ordeal over weeks of going at 6 o'clock in the morning for this early morning appointment. And maybe they only did it that early because of her husband's schedule. I don't know. But and when it was over, she said, this didn't work. So for her, maybe it helps others, but for her, it didn't. And so that's the thing about PMDD. Part of the cruelty of it is just because something works on one person doesn't mean it's going to work on you. So that's where you need a caring doctor to have patience to work with you. But so with that, the nurse practitioner said, I want you to have electroconvulsive therapy. The short form, the nickname for that is ECT, the acronym. And so I was texting her and begging her not to do it. And I don't know, do you have the movie Cuckoo's Nest there, the book, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Do you know that book?
I've never heard of it.
Okay. So it's an old movie and it's an old book, but it's about, a psychiatric hospital. And so she said to me, I said, no, don't do it. Don't do it. And she said, Mom, it's not Cuckoo's Nest. And she said, and see, I had only heard of ECT back in like the 1960s. And so I have this old fashioned view of it. And she said, it's never stopped. It's gotten better and better through the decades, supposedly. She said, watch the movie, watch the video I'm sending you. So I did watch it and I wrote her back and I said, it's made by the manufacturer, so of course it's going to look great. And so then she felt like she needed to be compliant because she was desperate. So she was supposed to have 12 sessions. So she had one session before she left the hospital. Then she's supposed to have 11 more through the month. And she did 11 total. And then she canceled the 12th session and came home to us to recover. She would call me during that month crying, saying, it's not helping, it's not helping. And then she couldn't explain why she was crying. And she felt like her memory was ruined and wiped out. I remember one time in one of those phone calls, her little girl slipped her a note that said, you're the best mom. Because her little girl was 5 and just was seeing her mama crying so much. And so Christina asked through texting, can I come home and sleep at your house for 2.5 weeks? And then I'll go back to my family. So we thought that was all prearranged with her and her husband and she was texting. So we said, sure, if only we had known how bad it was, because when she made it to our house, she should not have driven. She looked like she was going to fall down. And we asked her, how did you get here? She'd driven to our home many, many times. And she said, I don't know. I had to use GPS. So it broke our hearts. So we were trying to lift her spirits and get her back in better health. And I called a doctor that I'd heard of who was hard to get into. And she arrived on a Saturday on American Halloween, October 31st. And by the following Monday, 2 days later, I called the doctor's office. I'd never been to him, but he had been highly recommended by some of my friends. And I said, you don't know me, but I have a daughter who just arrived at our home and we're in shock. We have never seen her like this. And to us, we're very scared for her. And so is there any way your doctor can see her? Because I know I've heard from my friends that it takes 5 to 7 months to get in. And he saw her by Friday. So 5 days later, he saw her. And because of him, we got to a really good behavioral health unit at a hospital where the inpatient psychiatrist director became her doctor. And she spent over 100 days cumulatively with him in and out of the hospital. But because he'd keep her as long as he wanted to. In the U.S., if somebody goes to the ER and then goes to a behavioral health unit in the hospital. It's usually a 3 to 5 day stay at the most. But with her, that doctor would say, if I need to keep her 30 days, 20 days, 2 months, it's my business. Don't listen to anybody else. If anybody from the hospital calls you and says she's been here too long, don't listen to them. Don't worry about it. I'm going to keep her. I want to see how she responds to things. But he wasn't thinking about the menstrual cycle. And by March, now, so she arrived on October 31st. Now we're into March 2021. And we're having our weekly Zoom meeting with him and our daughter because it was COVID, so we couldn't go into the hospital. And so our weekly Zoom meeting, and he said he knew we would gladly have a Zoom meeting every day if we could. But we spoke to Christina on the patient line every day, sometimes several times a day, because she would call a lot. And that was fine. She was our priority. But by March, we had a call before we were to go pick her up. And there were two things that I asked about. One was, could this be related to her menstrual cycle? Because she just mentioned to me that she had started her period in the hospital. And he was saying how good she seemed, like you wouldn't be able to tell that she has anything wrong with her right now. And he felt like it was the medication. He wasn't linking it to her cycle. And he said, no, I don't think so. But he's a good man, and he loved Christina in an appropriate doctor way. He cared about her. But so Christina wasn't reporting when her periods were starting, and the nurses weren't charting, or the assistants weren't charting when she asked for menstrual supplies. Then the other question I asked him, because we had seen suicide attempts already and we'd seen the psychosis, and we were worried for her safety. And so I asked if it would be a good idea for her to sleep in our room, that we could put a bed in our room for her. And he loved it. Then I turned to Christina and said, honey, only if you agree, because you are a 32-year-old woman, we will not force you to do anything. And she said, no, I should not be alone. So if I could sleep in your room, that would be great. And we would reassure her every night that this was fine. But sometimes she would cry and she'd say, Mom, how is it that I'm a 32-year-old woman sleeping in my parents' room when I have a husband and 2 children? I used to be a nurse. I used to be the one who could do anything and everything. And now I'm living with my parents. You know, what's happened? She'd say, my life is in shambles. And her other line that she would say is, my life is in shattered pieces on the floor and I don't know how to pick them up. So, you know, our hearts were breaking because this was not a daughter we had seen before. And her life was destroyed. And it was from PMDD, but none of us are knowing about PMDD. So we used to we would talk about it, how we felt like we were in a dark tunnel together. And every once in a while, we'd get little lights that somebody would give us an idea or a suggestion. So we'd follow those little lights as we're feeling our way through this tunnel. And we would say, you know, we're in this tunnel, but we've got to look at the good. Look at what good things have happened so far. Because someday the light's going to shine in. Someday we're going to get answers. But so we'll stay together. We're going to do this. You're our priority, Christina. And however long it takes, we're here for you. And you can always sleep in our room. You matter more than anything. And then it got to a point where we had to lock up all the knives and scissors in a lockbox and keep those in our pantry. And she was embarrassed about that. And I'd say, well, it's COVID. Nobody's even here. We're not having company over. It doesn't matter. And then she felt embarrassed. I said, really, our priority is you. We just want to keep you alive. And so whatever we have to do to protect you, we will. So then we had certain rooms locked off, the attic, the storage rooms. We had a deck that was 3 stories high. We had that locked off. Anything where she could get hurt, we didn't want those available to her. And we ended up taking away car keys, and that was all with her approval. We didn't want to force anything. And her doctor was always trying to come up with things. And while Christina and my husband Steve were sleeping at night, I'd wear this little thing around my neck that had little lights so I could read in the dark. And I kept ordering books on Amazon about depression and anxiety and stopping the ruminations and the intrusive thoughts and the chatter in the brain and all of these things. But what I didn't realize is I'm reading about symptoms that could belong with several different mental disorders. But none of the books listed what those disorders could be. Then I also took a class, a family-to-family class. So while Christina was in the hospital, mainly, when she was away from us, I was on Wednesday nights for several weeks doing this family to family class through. It's called NAMI, NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. And that class was so helpful. But here again, it listed some mental disorders like major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, things like that, but it didn't list PMDD. And I've spoken to a few people now about please get that in there. It's got to be considered. But it was helpful. And if Christina were home, if she were out of the hospital on one of my nights of the class, I just wear earbuds and I would write in the chat in the Zoom meeting that I can't participate unless I write my answers in the chat because Christina was home. I didn't want her to hear anything. So, but it helped me as a mom to learn more because I needed the vocabulary. I didn't have that vocabulary about mental illness. And so I was just beginning to understand the word anxiety. Oh, you mean this is anxiety? I've had anxiety my whole life. How come I never knew what it was called? Panic attacks, things like that, psychosis, all this. I needed those words. So I would encourage any family to do that, to reach out to NAMI, sign up for their family to family class, just so you can be a better support, because we had to move past shock into action to lift her up, to help her stand up, and to keep her moving forward and trying to help her get to the right doctors or the right therapies. So we were constantly trying to get to different therapies in that year. So it was really the hardest year of our life. And now I'll stop talking. You might have another question. So
No. Go on with this story. How
okay.
and how did you learn about the name of PMDD actually? Because
Okay.
you mentioned the
So
times where you had no idea that it
yeah.
existed. It crossed your mind it might be connected with hair cycle, which
Mhm.
you said that the doctor didn't agree with. So why?
Right.
How did you learn about
Okay.
that it might be PMDD?
Right. So by March here, he didn't think that was it. So it kind of took us off that trail. Um, Another thing we would do, because her hospital was 45 minutes away. We do have a hospital close by that she would be taken to by ambulance. But when we drove her ourselves, we were taking her to that hospital, 45 minutes away. And there was there were nights that we would go a couple times a week, and we would go into the parking lot after driving almost an hour to get there. And we'd call her on the patient line because they can't have their cell phones, at least this hospital. And I imagine it's true of other behavioral health units. You can't have your phone in the behavioral health unit with you. Um, but so she could use the patient line. So I would call her and say, okay, we're outside in the parking lot. So then she and her nurse would walk down a hall, and there were windows that were floor to ceiling, tall windows. And then she was up on the fourth floor, so we could wave to her. And so we'd sign to her that we loved her and, give her hug symbols. And then we would drop off a bag in the emergency room. I was allowed to walk in the emergency room. With COVID, they were so strict, but I could give them a bag and with a note on it that this was for Christina and where she was. And the security guard would take it upstairs. And we would usually get her new pajamas, new yoga pants, new slip-on shoes. Sometimes she wanted music because they could get out the keyboard for her and she could play for the patients, because she was a classically trained vocalist and pianist. But she was out of practice too. This is kind of interesting. I learned in one of those books that I was reading at night to ask your patients or ask your loved one, when did you stop doing the thing that you loved the most? And for her, singing, because she sang before she spoke. I mean, she could carry tunes and remember them. And so I asked her that one time. I said, when did you stop playing the piano and when did you stop singing? And she said 8 years ago. And so that was around the time she had her babies. So I think it's when that all just got worse. And then I think COVID is when it really brought it out, because she explained to me that being in school, in high school and in college kept her moving forward because of due dates for homework and for tests. Then after she graduated, her work schedule kept her moving forward. And then it was service in her church, because she was always in leadership. And so she's meeting with people. She's friends with these women that she's working with. She loved it so much. She loved church. She loves God. She loves everything about church. And so then when COVID hit and everything stopped, now it's hard to keep track of what day it is, especially if you have an illness that is making you so sick. And so here she is with her little children at her knees. And for part of the month, she doesn't even feel good enough to get off the couch. And then she's feeling guilty and ashamed. And she'd call me crying because she didn't have it in her to get up and do laundry or to make meals, um, really good, healthy meals. And I'd say, it's okay if this week your kids are eating Cheerios. And I would say, Christina, your kids just want you. And if you're fatigued this week, it's okay. They're not checking to see if you've done the laundry. And they don't care if their toys are everywhere. They don't care if the house is clean. Um, so they're not looking at you that way. They only want you. They want their mama. But there was nothing I could do to make her believe that. I would try, and I didn't know I'm talking to PMDD. So it wasn't until July. And by this point, we'd seen serious suicide attempts and we'd seen her going in and out of psychosis. And we had to take her back to the hospital on July 16th, 2021. She'd slipped into psychosis again. And so I was texting with her doctor, and he said it wouldn't be an overreaction to bring her back to me. He'd put her on a very strong prescription that could be even dangerous, and we had to trust him. And it was helping, but not enough. And he said, I started her on the lowest dose. So assure her that I'm not going to keep her very long. I'm just going to keep her maybe 4 days just to increase this dose. And so I had to tell her, I said, Christina, he wants you to come back just for a few days. And she's going, no, no. And I said, no, really, it's just for a few days. But then, so we drove her back to this hospital. And when we got home, we always prayed at night. We always said our prayers by our bed. And Steve and I were praying for her. And we're saying, Heavenly Father, pardon me, it's been 9 months. 9 months she's been at our home, and we don't know where she went. Where's our daughter? I used to ask her psychiatrist that all the time. Where did she go? And we said, she's married. She has 2 little children. We need to get her well. We need to get her back home. And so then at the end of that prayer, I'm looking at her bed in our room. I just think, what happened to her beautiful life? Everything just seemed so charmed. She just had such a good life, and it was gone. And so I lay my head on my pillow, and I heard a voice speak in my mind, right above my right ear, and it said, "Look up menstrual psychosis." Now, that was the 3rd time in my life I've heard that voice, and each time it's been short. No conversation. No, there wouldn't be a chance for me to ask more. It's just, that's it. That's it. Just something brief. And so I obeyed it. I looked up menstrual psychosis, and all of a sudden, even though it was 11 o'clock at night, I was wide awake, and I read about PMDD from peer-reviewed journals, all these different published manuscripts about PMDD. And I read all night long, and in the morning I called her psychiatrist. He was so thrilled. And then I made a grid with her period tracking app, because that's when I had the flashback, picturing her updating her phone when I would hand her phone in the car every time we picked her up. But she wouldn't remember her admission dates because she was always in distress. And so I knew those dates. So I made a grid showing her admission dates, the reason why she was admitted, and then when her period started, and they aligned very closely. Sometimes within hours. Sometimes she started her period before she even saw the doctor in the behavioral health unit in the morning. And so those were unusual calls. I got a couple calls from shortly after she had aborted a suicide attempt, and she had called the police herself. She was always away from home. It was before we took away the car keys. And the police would call and say, "We have Christina." They knew her. But see, Christina was so gentle. They knew she was not a fighter. She wasn't combative, but she would abort these suicide attempts and call them. then we would go to the emergency room to meet her, and I'd say, what happened? Why are you like a moth to the flame? Um, and she'd say, I don't know, Mom. I'm just so glad to be alive. And one time it was so serious, she had a serious suicide attempt, and a surgeon just happened at the end of the day to go to the grocery store because his wife asked him to buy tomatoes.
Mm.
And at our grocery stores, they're big, and there's a grocery side, and then there's the pharmacy side. And he didn't park on the grocery side. He parked on the pharmacy side, and that's the only way he would have found her. So you see all the miracles. And then he had a trauma kit in his car. So he got his trauma kit and he saved her life. And he had to do CPR on her, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. He had to bring her back. She was already gone. And he brought her back, and he expected that she would have had a massive stroke and not be able to stand or talk. So he told me he was shocked when she opened her eyes, thanked him, and stood up and thanked the crowd. So then she was taken by ambulance to our local hospital. And then there's something in our American system where insurance companies don't like to pay for what's called a lateral transfer. So I asked her doctor in the hospital, in the behavioral health unit, I said, can you do a transfer and get her back down to that other hospital 45 minutes away? And she said, we would love for her to be back with that doctor. We wish we could, because we know that he knows her best. But that would be called a lateral transfer, and insurance companies won't pay for it. And it's thousands of dollars to do this transfer. So she said, our nurse and our social worker have already tried. So I called the insurance company myself, and I spoke to this very nice woman. I had authorization. Christina had to authorize me. And so I had dealt with them many times already. And I just never told Christina because I'm not going to concern her. You know, we always got everything approved. They'd been so good with us. And so I told the woman this story, and I told about Christina, and she said, now please stay on hold. I'm going to put you on hold for a very, very long time. And, when she finally came back, I don't know how many minutes had passed. If maybe it was 15, 20 minutes. I don't know. But she came back and she said, your daughter will be taken back to her other doctor at 3:00 today. The ambulance will be there to take her.
Oh, truly.
So I called the doctor in that behavioral health unit where she was, and I said, it's been approved. And she goes, how did you do that? And I said, I'm a mom. That's all I can say. So thanks to God, I guess. I just am so thankful. But so with with that story, what happened there was a month later, the surgeon who saved her in the parking lot invited her over for dessert. And his wife is also a doctor, and my husband went with her. I couldn't go. Um, and so anyway, when she came home, she said, Mom, it was a God thing that he saved me. It was a God thing that he was in that parking lot. To think he went to buy tomatoes, who does that at the end of a work day? And our other daughter even said, Mom, tomatoes are accessories. You don't need tomatoes on your salad or on your tacos. You don't have to have tomatoes. And so our whole family was amazed that he was willing to go buy tomatoes at the end of the day. And then he parked on the side of the parking lot where he would see her on the ground. And so we thought it was a miracle. And she said, I'll never attempt again. And then 2 days later, she attempted again. 2 days later. So the police called. And they said, we have Christina, and meet us at the ER. So we did. I said, honey, what happened? You just said 2 days ago you'd never attempt again, that was a God thing, that you were saved last month. So what happened? She goes, Mom, I don't know what it is. But for her, it was like a light switch. And then something took over. It's that foreign hacker gets even more intense, that whatever's controlling her brain. And it just would bring on this urge where it's urgent to do it. And then she would abort, though. And so then now fast forward 1 month later, now she's back in the hospital with the psychosis. And so here, when I called her and said, honey, we know what you have, it came to me in the night. And so I told her that story. And I said, what would have helped you? And she said, well, I've started my periods too often in the night before I see a doctor in the behavioral health unit. And by that, then they think I'm fine. I'm back to normal. I can go home. And so they need to be asking me in the emergency room when I'm in that state, when I just aborted suicide or in psychosis. And she said, I know I could answer 3 simple questions, but the questions have to be simple considering what state I'm in. And so she said the 3 questions are easy. And, here she is, a nurse. I'm talking to my nurse, Christina. And she said, if they'll just ask me, when was your last period? When are you expecting your next period? And what is PMS like for you? And she said, say the term PMS because I know PMS. But if they were to bring up PMDD at that point, it might have been too much for how sick I was at the moment. But I know even if I were in psychosis or had just attempted suicide, I would have said so easily, my PMS is lasting 2 weeks. Then I told her, though, that there are all these other symptoms with PMDD. And she wouldn't have known that, but they could have asked her, tell us about what you experience. And then she could have told them about the depression, the weepiness, the anxiety, all of that. But then they could, if they could determine if she were up to a conversation then or if they needed to wait till the next day. But they could have eventually have said, well, there's something called PMDD and it's so much more severe than PMS. And with that, they could have then told her about other symptoms to see if she had those. Like, do you ever feel like staying in bed all day long? Do you ever find that it's hard to get out of bed? Do you have these body aches and pains? Oh, yes, I go to a chiropractor and massage therapist. Oh, you mean that has something to do with this? Do you ever feel like wanting a divorce or quitting a job abruptly? Do you ever feel absolutely overwhelmed? Do you ever feel like you can't concentrate? Things like that. Do you write journals that are so sad and heavy? Heart-wrenching journal entries. Things like that could make a difference if they were to talk about those. And she would have been saying, yes, 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 yes. And the suicidality, that is this happening right before your period starts? These types of things. Also, let's say that she remembered when her last period was, but she doesn't have her phone with her to know the next period. It doesn't matter. They can always count forward and figure that one out. But also for some women, it's like a little side note. There's some women who have their serious symptoms closer to ovulation. That's not as many. For Christina, she would have many of the symptoms of PMDD for those 2 weeks, but the danger was right before her period started. So everybody's a little bit different. But so it is good to know when somebody is ovulated and try to figure this out to see if they can create a better picture of the person. So we were excited thinking that then we would be getting help for her. But am I getting ahead? I don't want to be jumping ahead if you have other questions.
No, go on. Everything is.
It's okay. Well, the psychiatrist was so grateful, and he said, now we need to get her on chemical menopause because she obviously can't try birth control because that's not her. He knew that she had tried it twice for cramping, and that was not her friend. It really made her worse. And yet birth control can be a very effective treatment for a lot of women who have PMDD. That's just how it is. It either is or it isn't. It's different for everyone. But so and then there are different kinds of birth control. So then you can go down a whole nother conversation, a whole podcast on birth control. And that's same with SSRIs and SNRIs and all of that. You could, there are probably 10 more podcasts you could do with people about all these different kinds of treatments and all of that.
I will also invite you.
Yeah, well, I'm not the expert, but we're sharing our lived experience. And if anybody relates to this, I just hope that it's ringing alarm bells in their minds. Like, let's start tracking the period and let's consider the menstrual cycle. And let's not get upset if a doctor asks about the menstrual cycle because it is a 5th vital sign. It needs to be asked about. I did ask Christina that morning when I was on the phone with her, I said, "Did anybody ever chart your periods in the hospital?" And she said, "No." I said, "So when you ask for menstrual supplies and the CNA, that's the certified nurse assistant or something,
Mhm.
um, if the CNA brought you menstrual supplies, they're not charting that you're starting your period?" She said, "No." And I said, "Did you know to tell your doctor that you started your period?" And she said, "No, I thought that would be like telling him that I had a hamburger for dinner last night."
Oh.
I said, "Oh, honey, no." I said, "What I've been learning all night long and reading all
Uh-huh.
night long is your uh, reproductive hormones are steroids, and they're affecting your brain. And so they can affect other parts of your body as well, because some women get diarrhea, constipation, gas, bloating, all that. So you think these reproductive hormones that are steroids, they're affecting other parts of the body as well. And then we would later learn that they affected her friend's heart.
Mhm.
And so she needed help, and it was because she was having a heart attack one time, and it was because of her reproductive hormones.
No.
So yeah, so the thing is that too often, how come we're not considering the menstrual cycle for our health problems? It's as if we've taken it completely out of the equation and set our
Mhm.
menstrual cycle to the side of our bodies when it's an active part of our bodies. These reproductive hormones are communicating with our brain all the time and with other organs and all this. So we have got to be paying attention to this and tracking, and doctors need to be asking about the cycle. Um, so, uh, anyway, that was insightful for us that she didn't even know that it was relevant to bring it up, as if it's just its own little side function
Mhm.
going on, for having a monthly period. Um, so, then I got her to one gynecologist, because the psychiatrist said, you need to get her to a gynecologist to try chemical menopause. And
Mhm.
the first one said, "Oh gosh, you'd have to do a peer to peer." And what that means is a doctor from the insurance company would be calling that doctor to do a peer to peer conversation about whether or not that's necessary to do chemical menopause.
Mhm.
And I looked at him because I had worked in medicine, and I said, "Well, you know who I've worked for? I've worked for 4 different surgeons, and they do peer to peers all the time. So you can do a peer to peer."
Mhm.
"Well, yeah." But then he just really didn't want, "Oh, but it's so expensive and all this stuff." And then he said, "And besides, Christina, you're doing so well on this prescription that your inpatient psychiatrist prescribed for you." And then Christina tried to explain to him, well, it could kill me though. I
Mhm.
have to get my blood tested every week before I can refill the prescription. I have to refill it every single week. That's just an inconvenience. I'm not allowed to drive while taking it. Oh, that's inconvenient. And I mean, that's just an inconvenience. And your mom doesn't mind driving you places. And then she said other things that it causes that for a 32-year-old woman, she doesn't want to have to deal with. And
Mhm.
he said, "Those are just inconveniences. Christina, you're doing fine. You don't even have to follow up with me."
Mhm.
So medical gaslighting at its finest. And
Uh-huh.
so then I tried getting her to another gynecologist, and I asked the scheduler if I may please send an email so we don't have to talk about everything in the appointment in front of Christina about her many attempts and the psychosis, and that she's been away from her family for so long, which by the way, she was FaceTiming her children every day. And per the doctor's wisdom, he said we don't want her to lose her maternal instinct. And then we made sure that we had the
Mhm.
children every month for a weekend. So we would
Mm.
go meet, because her children were 5 hours away. So we would meet their father at the halfway point and bring the children back. So she would
Mm.
have time with her little children. And they love their mama so much. And they would sleep in our room too. We said, "This is our fun thing. We cocoon. We have like a slumber party."
Mhm.
And so they were happy about that. And her little girl always had to just sleep right next to Christina with her arms around her.
Mhm.
And one night I caught little Cassidy, her little daughter, putting her hands on Christina's cheeks and just studying her face. And
Wow.
Christina was already asleep, and her little daughter was just looking at her and studying every feature. I wanted to take a picture, but at the same time, I felt like, no, this is too sacred. So I just watched. It was so touching. Little did I know, I hope that she was able to memorize Christina's face because it wouldn't be that much longer and then we'd lose Christina. But so I sent this preemptive email to the scheduler and to send to the doctor. And then she called me back and she said he wants to cancel the appointment. He doesn't want to see her because she has such severe PMDD. He doesn't know how to help her. And then another doctor was recommended, and this lady was supposedly a guru of hormones, and she stopped delivering babies just to focus on helping couples get pregnant using IVF and helping women with menopause. But there was nothing about PMDD. So when I called and asked, oh yeah, she can see her, that's fine. And she was in the same gynecology practice as the doctor who turned us down. So I asked the scheduler, will you please send her that email? So fine. But then when we got into that appointment, that lady said, well, I want to prove it hormonally. And we said, no. Hormones are not her friend. Do not do birth control. And the psychiatrist wants you to do chemical menopause. She said, no, I want to prove it hormonally. I said, well, but we've already proven it. We've already got the grid. We know it's PMDD. No, she'll be fine. And I said, this is too dangerous. We do not want to do birth control. And she said, no, it'll be fine. It'll be the patch. So she was suggesting to us that the patch would stay local. Well, we trusted her. And, here's my poor little sick Christina, probably with brain fog. And, I would be in the car and I would ask her in the car, can you speak up a little bit more so it doesn't look like I'm trying to control the appointments? And it doesn't look good, I think. And, but she couldn't. She just couldn't. And so we trusted this doctor. And then Christina called for help twice. And she was treated dismissively. She went in for an appointment in between those two calls and was treated dismissively. I gotta plug in my battery. But so with that, we didn't know this would happen because I thought that I was seeing good signs about Christina enjoying a fall day when we were on a walk together. And then she helped on Halloween on October 31st. I remember marking that because it had been exactly 1 year since she arrived and she had practically fallen into our home. She was so sick when she arrived. And now this year, 1 year later, she's giving out the candy to the children at our front door. And I was so excited. I was seeing these little things, little signs that we're doing better. And then 3 days later, she died. And we didn't see it coming.
It's so heartbreaking, but it's also a history, as I told you before, for me of such big family love, of such big family support, and the year that you had for one another.
Oh, I'm so thankful for that year. There was some healing because PMDD can cause some grudges and it can cause resentments. And we didn't resent her, but it helped us understand, when I read about the sensitivities and things, it made sense about when she didn't like to have company on Christmas Eve that time. But when she first arrived at our house, the year before, she said, Mom, I've had a grudge against you all these years. I need to get out. I said, what is that? And she said, well, one time you tried to force me to wear an outfit on the first Sunday I went to church at college. And I said, and so she told me her perspective. I said, can I share my perspective with you? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, you and I had just shopped together all summer long, getting you ready for college. And everything you picked out just looked terrific on you. And everything was just great. And I remember we traveled up there to Utah and I was hanging up your clothes in the closet and I can picture everything because we just bought it for you. And then when we left your apartment, you had made so many cute choices for decorating it. It was darling. And then Dad and I got in the car to drive home. I said it was a 24-hour drive and I was crying most of that time because I was missing you so much. And I knew that we were going home to an empty house because we only had the two girls and Marissa was already, had already done college, graduated and everything. And then I said, for the next 3 days, I cried at every meal. And Daddy would tease me and say, "You've got to stop this crying." I said, "I will. I will. We just know it takes me 3 days to process." And I said, "I wanted to call you so badly, but I didn't want to be that mom who was bugging you too much." So I thought, okay, if I don't hear from you from Saturday, that'll be a good sign that you're loving it. But I'm going to call you by Saturday. I felt like that would give enough time. And so I finally called you, and you told me about all your awesome roommates, how great they are, and the good time that you were already having. And then there really wasn't anything else to talk about. So I was trying to think in my mind, what can I bring up? What can I ask her? And so the first thing I thought of is, oh, what are you going to wear to church tomorrow? I was just trying to show you that I was engaged and interested. But really, the truth is, I just wanted to keep hearing your voice because I missed you. And, and you told me, "Oh, I'm thinking of wearing this." And then to show you that I was engaged, I just said, "Oh," and then there's that cute outfit we got in South Texas on vacation. I said, "I promise I wasn't trying to force you to wear that. I just was trying to show you that I was listening and trying to have an active conversation. That's all it was." And I said, "You were 1,000 miles away. It would be impossible for me to force you to wear anything. You could have worn anything to church and it wouldn't have mattered. Everything was a winner." But I was just trying to keep you on the phone. That was all I wanted. And she said, "Mom, I feel so stupid now. I'm so embarrassed." She said, "I even complained about you to my mother-in-law. I've written about this in my journals, about how I resented you for this." And I said, "Well, isn't it so sad that that happened? Because you could have called me back right away and said, 'Mom, are you trying to force me?' And I would have said, 'No.' I said, 'Look at my history. All the time you were in growing up, I've never had to tell you or your sister to go change your clothes. It just isn't an issue in our family, but it happens every day in lots of homes. But you girls were always appropriate. You were fine, and so I've never had to do that. But it wouldn't have been a big deal because moms do that all the time. But I just didn't. That's not what I was doing." She goes, "Mom, I feel so bad because I've had that little grudge against you all these years." I said, "I just wish you'd called me back that day or a week later." But to hear now we're up to 2020, October 31st, 2020, and that happened in August of 2007. That's so sad. But maybe that'll give insight to somebody listening that PMDD can do that. PMDD is like the devil. It just messes up families big time. The individual who is truly suffering, but also their family members who don't understand what's going on. So I'm glad we finally had that conversation. And then through the year, 3 weeks in, as she was staying with us, she said, "Mom, I owe you an apology, Mom and Dad." She goes, "For the last 10 years, I thought you were against us and you showed me nothing but unconditional love." And we said, "Honey, or I said, that makes me feel a little defensive. Like I want to make a list of all the things we've done for you in the last 10 years. Flying to you, driving to you, helping with babies, babysitting, painting, doing yard work, all the stuff. We've done it, all the many times you've been to our house with the kids, all this, and the things that we've given, a car, a washer, dryer, this stuff like that, just clothes, all the things." And I said, "I feel a little defensive." She goes, "Mom, I see it now. You've never been against us." I said, "Not for even 1 second." So, is that PMDD? I guess so. Because where would that thought come from? It's not real. But so that's why, that darn foreign hacker that takes over the brain also tells lies. So we learned to call PMDD the great liar and thief. So we do personify PMDD as the foreign hacker and as the great liar and thief because it lies to you it tells you that you're worthless, that you're a burden, that your kids would have a better mother, they deserve somebody better than you. None of that's true.
It
Or that
exactly.
you're incompetent at work or that nobody likes you. None of that's true. And then it steals from you. It steals your joy. It steals your relationships with the people that love you the most. So, yeah, I've spoken to other moms who feel like um, they love their daughters so much. I used to tell my daughters, I would give you my beating heart if you needed it.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of moms feel that way. And, I've heard some moms say, yeah, I'm the whipping post. And I take it because I love her and I know she's suffering.
Mhm.
And because they know it's PMDD. And that's helped them cope with it, is understanding that it's PMDD.
Mhm.
So I'll stop talking because I'm sure now you have questions. So I've gone on long enough.
That's okay. I wanted you to mention, if you have maybe the experience or you may have heard, what can PMDD be mistaken with? Because it's very common that it gets undiagnosed and misdiagnosed. It's worth mentioning, I believe, because it might be that somebody listening to us doesn't even know about PMDDs, and
Yeah.
they are diagnosed with something else. What can it be?
Bipolar disorder is probably the most common misdiagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see why. Think of when somebody sees their doctor, their psychiatrist, they could see them in the follicular phase and be in a better mood. And then in the luteal phase, if the appointment happens next time in the luteal phase, they're feeling hopeless. They're feeling bad about themselves or about others. They could be mad at the world, lots of things. And then it could be back and forth depending on when these appointments are scheduled. And it can seem very obvious to the doctor that it's PMDD. Pardon me, bipolar disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so Christina was diagnosed with that at one point, and she called me and said, "Now my doctor thinks it's bipolar." And I said, "Really? Because I tell me more about this. I don't really know much about bipolar disorder, but what little I know, it doesn't seem to add up because I've known you your whole life." And she said, "Oh, that's because you're thinking of mania." I said, "Yeah, I've never seen you manic in your whole life." And she said, "But bipolar 2 doesn't have to include that mania." And so he thinks I have bipolar 2. I said, "Well, give it a try and see. It's fine if you have that. I'll
Mm-hmm.
just be happy for you if you have an answer." And then she would call me later and say, the prescription's not working. This is not it. This isn't working. She was really trying so hard. Um, but it is possible to have PMDD and PME at the same time. So it could be that somebody does have bipolar and PMDD. Don't you think that would be horrible to have?
Mm-hmm.
Even harder to deal with that because then that means the symptoms of bipolar disorder would exacerbate or get exaggerated in the luteal phase. At the same time, you're having the many symptoms of PMDD, depending on how many of those symptoms you have. So that could be a real challenging thing. Christina was also misdiagnosed as major depressive disorder, general anxiety disorder, panic disorder. Um, but the thing is that those are all symptoms of other mental health disorders, but they're also symptoms of PMDD.
Mm-hmm.
So um, you could have them separately because you could have major depressive disorder all month long,
Mm-hmm.
and then it gets worse in those 2 weeks. So that would be PME. So that's where you have to tease it out and back to tracking why you've got to track and be open minded in case it's not PMDD, because you don't want to force a diagnosis that isn't what it is. But at the same time, the tracking will help paint a picture of what it is. And
Mm-hmm.
you need to be patient. Do 2 months. If you need longer, do it for 3 months, whatever you need, so you can get a more accurate picture of it.
Exactly. You mentioned visiting, like meeting your psychiatrist in follicular phase or luteal phase. Would you suggest that date? Like which date to choose to set an appointment with a psychiatrist? Should it be in follicular or in
Uh,
luteal?
well, I've heard stories both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Because in follicular phase, you probably don't have the brain fog and you're in a much better mood. But
Mm-hmm.
are you going to accurately convey how bad it is? And this is where I really, and maybe with a psychiatrists, they would probably prefer to meet with you alone as opposed to having your mom sitting there or your best friend
Mhm.
or something.
Or a partner.
But if you're seeing your general practitioner, your family doctor, or an endocrinologist, there are different doctors who can treat this. Um, but you could say, we prepared a list of questions and concerns, and my mom or my friend or my spouse is going to do a lot of the talking because I'm just not up to it or something. Or I tend to understate. Because one mom wrote to me and she was telling me how difficult it is to take her daughter to the doctor's because her daughter's just a young teenager. And the daughter would downplay how severe the symptoms were because she must have been seeing the doctor in the follicular phase. And that's where the mom would jump in and try to convey, like, no, it is so much worse than this. And this is how it affects her. And then this is what happens in our household. And this is how it affects the whole family. And she was afraid that she was coming across too strongly in the appointment. So that's where a psychiatrist gave advice last year at the dinner that we had at our home after the first 5K we had. He didn't want to speak during the fireside chat time after the dinner because he was learning so much from all those who had PMDD, and he was grateful that they had the courage to share and that they didn't mind that he was there. And he said, if I may just add one thing to help the moms who are here, and just say at the beginning of appointments that my daughter and I have come up with a list of questions and concerns. She's asked me to do a lot of the talking because she has a little white coat syndrome. She's just a little nervous around
Mhm.
doctors. And he said maybe that'll help because there's a term called Munchausen's, and some moms feel like I'm going to sound like a Munchausen's mom. And that's where you try to get family members to look sicker than they are. Like there are some moms who have this mental illness where they want their kids to be sick all the time, and that's a
Mhm.
Munchausen's mom. And so they're afraid, like, I'm going to look like that, and I don't want to look like that. So I thought that was good advice that he gave.
Mhm.
But did I answer your question, or what was the rest of the question?
No, I think
Oh,
you did, but the other part of this
yeah.
question is which doctor should we set appointments with? We mentioned, of course, psychiatrist. This is
Uh-huh.
someone we can strongly recommend, but you also mentioned GP or endocrinologist. How would you say
Gynecologist.
the correct diagnosis should look like? Like who to contact
Okay.
if you are, you are the person who for the first time hears the term PMDD. Like who
Uh-huh.
to contact, where to go?
Well, I'm a little biased. I kind of like the idea of starting with a psychiatrist first.
Me too.
And the reason why I'd say that in our case, so you'll understand why I'm biased, is because birth control we already knew was not Christina's
Mhm.
friend. But then again, it may get to a point where you need to try chemical menopause. But so, and I say this, and gosh, it just depends on the individual. And some of that may take trial and error because some people who are going to the doctor will be going for maybe their first or second time. They haven't had that many things wrong with them.
Mhm.
And so, other than to get their vaccinations, they probably haven't gone all that much. And so, it's hard to tell because a psychiatrist, gynecologist, your family doctor, endocrinologist, which reminds me right now, another thing that you could be wanting to consider is if you have thyroid issues,
Mhm.
and so a doctor might consider that too. But,
Mhm.
Christina was taking thyroid medicine because we all do in our family,
Mhm.
the girl, we
That's
all
right.
do.
Phenomenal.
And so we all have Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. Um, and hypothyroidism undiagnosed can get severe enough that you could have intrusive thoughts too, and anxiety and all that too, or extreme fatigue. But that's going to happen all month long, not
Mhm.
just in your luteal phase. Um, but so with these doctors, it just depends on how you do. And as I'm speaking about this, it's making me think about how if somebody's hearing about PMDD for the first time, they might be afraid that they're doomed, that nothing's going to work for them because of the way I'm talking. Because it was hard to find anything that worked for Christina. She was really definitely treatment resistant. Um, but there are those who respond extremely well to birth control. And then maybe they have to trial a couple kinds to find one that they works best for their body.
Mhm.
But if they're not having dangerous side effects from it, like increased suicidality, they may want to just be patient and try a couple things. But then that's same for SSRIs. They may do well on SSRIs, but there are those who respond very well and they go on with their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not going to see them on the private message boards on Facebook or on Reddit, or they might not be on the boards on Instagram, wherever they are.
Mm-hmm.
They're not there because they're living their life, because they do respond well.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want everybody to feel like it's hopeless and this is so hard, because you might be one that the first thing you try works really well and you go on living.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, um, what else were you going to ask about that? Uh,
About targeted treatment, how do you feel about it? Do you think one
oh,
day there will be like one targeted treatment for everyone? Is there a possibility
um,
like that? Or you
well, I used to wish for that. I used to wish
uh-huh.
for a targeted treatment. And then, but then I've also known that there are different subsets of PMDD, because, I talked about the one who has her worst symptoms around ovulation, but then
Mm-hmm.
she has symptoms for 2 weeks. Then they build again before a period. So that, there are all these different types of ways that people respond. And then there are those for whom, like Christina, the period brings relief right away as soon as it starts. But then for others, it's not for days in. So they're doing research on this. And one researcher just published something about that, and about how she doesn't think there will be a targeted treatment because there are different, I'm going to use my own word, of variants of PMDD.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, then I would hope that there could be several targeted treatments if they could figure out what type you have. Who knows? And also, I will say genetic testing was helpful for Christina,
Oh.
because, and her doctor in the hospital, that behavioral health doctor in the behavioral health unit, we loved him so much because he really did care about Christina. And we think he's a fine, fine man. And he brought up genetic testing, and
Mm-hmm.
Christina remembered she had it done back in 2018 and never heard a word from her psychiatrist. He ordered it, and then
Mm-hmm.
she never got the report or anything. So they requested that report, and that was very insightful for a doctor. Then he could tell it would be a waste of her time to try certain things based on her genes.
Oh.
So he knew how to interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to consider, getting the genetic work done to see. And then now I can't speak to, I remember seeing his emails and his telling me she has this gene, therefore this and this and this is not going to work. And she has this gene and this will not work for her. And so I thought that was really interesting. And if only we'd known that sooner, but it was a good thing that he thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then let's see. Oh, what else would I hope for PMDD? So I don't know that there will ever be a targeted treatment.
Right.
I kind of lost hope. And as soon as I read that that's what that doctor wrote an article about, I thought, of course, that makes total sense. What she's saying about that. Um, but I think in families we can offer more support. There have been women who have told me that um, the quality of their marriage affected how severe their PMDD was. And so that could be true. But now we have a loving family and our daughter still died.
Mm-hmm.
And I have other friends whose daughters have died. And I know that they have loving families. And I know one was married and she had a supportive husband, but they didn't know about PMDD.
Mm-hmm.
And so the longer you go without knowing about PMDD and it's going undiagnosed year after year, the more you could slide down that spectrum of PMDD like Christina did.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I say that, though, I have to give a caveat and say, but there are already young girls in the hospital and behavioral health units from time to time for psychosis or suicidality or self-harm. So, you just don't know who's going to draw the short straw and have a tougher time with it.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody will have it as severe as Christina. In fact, I spoke to a very renowned researcher recently, and he said, your daughter has what I would consider the worst case of PMDD I've ever heard of.
Oh my goodness.
So, and I wasn't exaggerating. I was just telling him what we saw, what we witnessed that year.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a really good conversation. I was grateful for his time. Um, but so I don't want everybody to think that theirs will be bad, but far and above, it is so much worse than PMS. and it shouldn't be minimized. So for families, if you can show your support and if you could help offload some of the burdens in that luteal phase, because if your married daughter or your teenage daughter, if your loved one is so fatigued that they are not functioning, can you interact for them with the school? Maybe they need to miss some days of school and they need your support um, to get excused absences. But maybe they're A students the rest of the time. And I've seen that happen with a couple girls
Mm-hmm.
where they were A students, but there were a couple days in their month that they just absolutely could not walk into that school. Um, and so then one school was supportive and the other school wasn't. We've heard the tale of two different families, two different experiences with their school district.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one was extremely supportive. And then if you can go to NAMI and do the family to family class and get the vocabulary and learn what it looks like. What does anxiety look like? What do panic attacks look like? What does psychosis look like, sound like? So we're not all panicking in the house. You know, we can be more supportive and try to provide a calm atmosphere and not get engaged in arguments and don't fight back. You know, if your loved one is annoyed, you know, just listen and say, how can I help at this moment? What can I do to help? Um, Also practical things. I wish I were that mom who lived close to Christina. We had not lived near each other since 2007. And so she was always, you know, that a plane ride away or 24 hours by car. And then it was 7 hours away, then 5 hours away, depending on what state she was in and where we were living.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I wasn't that mom who was in the same neighborhood or the same town. And I wish I had been because I would have gone over to make dinners for her or to do her laundry or to help get the kids their baths at night and help them with their homework and get them tucked in bed. You know, things like that can go a long way towards making somebody feel supported.
Mm-hmm.
Walking the dogs, you know, feeding the pets, things like that, or just running the vacuum and tidying up the house. But you'd have to say, I'm not judging you because, you know, in their minds, in that luteal phase, that PMDD is lying to them and telling them that they're a burden and that they're not capable. So you can imagine how their mind could also jump to the conclusion
And they
that
are
you're
not
there
productive
because
enough.
part of,
They are not
yes,
productive enough. That's what we talk about. Remember?
yeah, I'm not productive enough. I'm just viewed
Mm-hmm.
as a lazy person.
Mm-hmm.
No, no, because wouldn't we do that if our loved one had cancer or had a heart problem or a kidney problem, any other kind of problem, a broken
Mm-hmm.
leg, whatever it was? We would think nothing of going over there and doing some things, fixing some meals and serving them on the couch, you know, making them comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to be doing this for PMDD and assuring them, you know, the luteal phase is so hard on you and I'm here to help you. You know, this is not you right now. Don't take it personally. I'm not judging you at all. And I want to listen and I want to hear what your thoughts and concerns are. Listen without judgment. Help doing practical things. You know, if they need to have their bills taken to the post office, you know, go to the post office for them. Take care of their mail. Take care of some yard work. Maybe they look out and they see that the lawn needs to be mowed. You know, things like that. Whatever can pick them up a little bit. Just try to do those little thoughtful things
Mm-hmm.
so that they can get the rest that they need. Because you're right, they're down on themselves because we value productivity in society
Mm-hmm.
and they are feeling like they're the laziest people on earth at the moment. And they
Exactly.
don't want their family thinking that.
Exactly. So from the PMDD warrior's point of view, I can tell that I know how much I'd appreciate all these actions that you've listed. It would mean the world to me.
Yeah. So can you imagine if you need your medication and you need someone to go to the pharmacy for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You know,
that's
these
like
type of things.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
5 minutes
Yeah.
for them, but for me, it's an immense help. I can remember for even all the luteal phase that I have someone who takes my back.
Uh-huh. So that seemed like a daunting task to you at the time to have to
Mhm.
get dressed, go out the
Yeah,
door
very
to
hard.
go Mhm.
That's not like
to drive somewhere. Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
so
Yeah.
someone can help me, so I'd appreciate it very, very much, very much.
Yeah.
And I know out of this immense support, your experience and immense love towards your daughter, you've created a foundation, Christina Bohn Foundation. I wanted to ask you what made you start this foundation, what gives you the strength, and what are the goals, in fact?
Okay. Well, when Christina died on November 3rd, 2021, I remember just longing for the friends who we raised her with, raised Christina with. You know, they raised their children with us. So those are there. We have a saying, make new friends, but keep the old. Um, new are silver and the other gold.
Mm-hmm.
And so those gold friends are the people that either you went to college with or you raised your children with. And of course, we love our friends who we have now, you know, where we live now. But those ones who we raised our kids with, they have those shared memories. And so I remember just longing for them, and they came. We had so many friends come from Texas, and they wanted to do the visitation room and set up all of Christina's things because they were there. It was
Mm-hmm.
so touching to me to overhear them as they're working in our home. And they
Mm-hmm.
were using our ping pong table in our basement to create, you know, their displays and all this. And they were saying, I remember this. I remember this. And one of our friends wanted to play the piano in the visitation room. And she was going through Christina's music because she used to accompany Christina when Christina would sing. And there's our friend's handwriting on Christina's music. So she
Oh.
was going through this and seeing her own handwriting. And so it's so touching to us. And one of those friends came, and she had already been to a graphic designer and had created a logo for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I just couldn't even imagine. I was so overwhelmed, and it seemed like a daunting thing. We had heard that creating a nonprofit in the US, it's called a 501c3 um, uh, charitable foundation, would be difficult because of the paperwork, and you have to pass it through your state and then through the federal government. And so that was such a thoughtful thing that she did for us, and to introduce that idea. And then another friend who we had a dear friend, she's still our dear friend, but she lived close to us. And during COVID, she would come over because she was single. And so she would spend time with Christina. And because our friend is athletic, she made sure Christina got the exercise that's so important for mental health. So they'd
Mm-hmm.
play tennis together when Christina felt well. They'd go to parking lot Zumba because it was COVID. So you did Zumba outside. Um, but so they were doing things together, and we were grateful for that. And she suggested it. Then our brother-in-law suggested it. So three people in this within like 24 hours are saying the same thing. And then, but you know, our poor minds, we were in shock still. So I don't remember a whole lot about that first week. So, so while they mentioned it, I'm sure I didn't think about it for a long time afterwards
Mm-hmm.
because it's just too much shock going on. Um, but then we think about it, and it just seemed overwhelming. And then last year, so 3 years after Christina died, it clicked. We finally processed and thought, okay, we need to do this to formalize this because we had been spending our own money, which is fine. But we had already spent tens of thousands of dollars doing PMDD awareness
Mm-hmm.
because we started with her obituary. We wrote about her beautiful life, and I didn't want her children someday to read it because I know I wrote it with an eye toward 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, when her
Mm-hmm.
children are the only people on the earth who are reading that obituary. And I was thinking, they're going to just think grandma wrote this, but it's not true because of the way their mother died, right? You know, I didn't want them to have that overshadow everything because Christina was all the wonderful things. So I included quotes from friends
Mm-hmm.
about Christina so
Oh.
that they would know it's not just grandma saying this.
Mm-hmm.
This is other people thought so too about your mom.
Oh.
And so then at the end, I wrote, Christina suffered from premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And if you would like to learn more about PMDD, visit the International Association for Premenstrual Disorders, iapmd.org.
Mm-hmm.
We really have a lot of respect for the International Association for Premenstrual Disorders. We think it is the hub of all things PMDD. There you'll get the resources the self-diagnostic tool, the tracking, many peer-reviewed manuscripts. They do the webinars, they have the peer support online, and then they also have the Facebook group. So why would we want to create anything? I didn't see the point when that already exists. So we are not young people, we're close to retirement age. And so what we really wanted to do was we saw the value in telling Christina's story and increasing awareness. So we started with her obituary, then the death certificate was created, and I knew the person in the coroner's office. So from when I worked at the university hospital. And so I asked her, could you change this? Take away how she died. I mean, I knew that they had to write suicide, but take away the method, because we never speak of that ever. No one should ever speak about how their loved one died, because you don't want copycat. But then, but please put premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And she questioned me, why would you want that? And I said, because her descendants need to know. This may help. What if somehow, further down, she has a great granddaughter? I don't know. We'll just have to see, but that will be of more benefit. Not only that, but I imagine for research, when we talk about maternal mortality, we need to have this listed in case they ever pull from death certificates on why young mothers die. So then we also asked International Association for Premenstrual Disorders, IAPMD, if they had cards that we could put in Christina's funeral program. And so they hurried and made a card, and then they sent us a PDF. So we printed 500 or so for that. And I always say 500, but now I'm thinking, I think it was more like 1,000, but I don't remember, because we were sending a lot home with people. But so now we've printed almost 50,000. But so now, and we'd already started speaking right off the bat. So shortly after she died, we started speaking in conferences and a faculty meeting and for a nursing school at the University of Missouri. And then I spoke at the Women's Mental Health Conference at Yale, and had different opportunities, and spoke at churches, a Rotary Club, different places. And then we also had eat tables at events, like community events or at conferences. So we would give out these cards and have posters and all this. And so just last year, it clicked. We had the first 5K for Christina Bohn Memorial 5K for PMDD awareness. And after that 5K, it clicked with us about, now it makes sense. Now we understand. And we want our sponsors to be able to get the tax write-off. And we are spending so much money on this, and we would appreciate donations, because this isn't just for us. This is bigger than we are. This is to help women, because like my brother-in-law said it so well once, and we were saying it, and I think it's so true. There are millions of Christinas out there. So many Christinas. And IAPMD has reached, I don't even know how many millions. They've done maybe a couple million by now or so. But, when you think about it, everybody needs to, like what you are doing with your podcast, be part of that ripple effect. And eventually all our circles will connect. When you look back to PMS, when PMS became known, it was in the 1980s. I was in college. It was early 1980s. And it used to be on the morning talk shows, and it was in magazines. I've noticed that since Christina died, I'm seeing much more on social media, and I'm seeing more in magazines. So it is starting to become more well-known, but it is global. So we've got to help everybody, families and those who have it, know about it, because Christina isn't the only one who has got a long time. I asked on one social media platform one time, how many years did you go before you were diagnosed correctly with PMDD? Because Christina sought help for 11 years, and no one asked her about her menstrual cycle. But she estimated that she had it for 15 years. I got over 100 responses. One said over 40 years. There were two who said over 30 years. There were a bunch who said in the 20 to 30 year range. The majority were in the 10 to 20 year range, which works with what IAPMD says from their studies, that it takes an average of 12 years to be diagnosed.
Which is
And
already
then, and that's because of lack of awareness. It's not that you go to the doctor for 12 years for multiple tests to be diagnosed with it. It's because nobody knows about it, right? Well, only 2 out of the over 100 responses could say they were diagnosed in a matter of months because their doctors knew about it. So awareness is what makes all the difference.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and then the year before that, in 2023, we passed the nation's first PMDD Awareness Day
Oh, I was
in
waiting for you to
Missouri.
mention that.
Yeah.
That's
I,
important. Tell us more.
that was really exciting. So we had an event at the Capitol, and the legislator who wrote the bill, he wanted it to be on her birthday. So it's on October 2nd. So, we've been doing all these things. And so that happened at the PMDD Awareness Day in Missouri on October 2nd. Then we had the first 5K. Now we're having the second 5K coming up in just 5 days on October 18th.
From now, yeah.
Yeah. And then,
It's an annual
and
thing,
so we'll
isn't
just
it?
keep
So we
going.
can hope it will happen. It's an annual thing, isn't it? So we can hope it will also happen, the 5K Memorial next year also, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's annual. And so we'll be planning on that. This is kind of a cute thing to know about that. We all have to work with the University of Missouri football schedule. So we all wait to schedule our events until we know when the football games are happening in town, because you can't schedule when there's a football game because the
And we
hotels
know
get
it will be
booked.
in the fall of
Yeah,
2026,
it'll
right?
be in the fall. We try to keep it in October since our state's PMDD Awareness Day is on Christina's birthday, October 2nd. But we don't have to have it on that day. We just have to find a Saturday where there isn't a football game.
So as far as I know, we can participate in person or virtual, right?
Correct. Yeah. So you can look forward to that next year. I don't know when you're going to publish this online, so it might not be for this year, but if somebody can get in, we ship the shirts. Well, we shipped yours to Poland last week, so I don't know when it'll get there. I'm not sure how
And I'm
long it
planning
takes.
to come in 2026, so nothing can stop me. Get
Oh my
ready.
gosh. Oh my gosh. And then the best, what I love, I don't know what I love more, the actual events or the dinner in the evening. I think I love them both the
Oh,
same, because then we had it in 2023, 24, and now in 25. And that is a dinner for those with PMDD and one of their guests.
mm.
And so, like, somebody might want to come with their best friend or their mom or their spouse. It's fine. And then we've invited just a few healthcare professionals. And so then somebody leads a fireside chat, and we have somebody really special this year, but I'm not allowed to say who it is.
Oh,
I know,
but I
and
keep fingers crossed anyway.
I'm so excited about it.
Yeah.
And then there's somebody, a talented vocalist, a singer. She is singing at the 5K and at our house. I'm just so
Wow.
excited. So, and she has PMDD, and so, but
Wow, that makes a lot.
and yet she has this incredible career, and so there are things that we can learn from each other. That's why we do it, to get together and learn from each other. Last year, there was somebody there, and she had just finished medical school, and she was starting a residency. So in the US, you go to medical school for 4 years, then
Mm-hmm.
you go into residency, and then residency lasts for different specialties, different amounts of
It's
time.
similar here too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, oh, okay. And so she was just now, like, she would have started July 1st, and it was that last year's 5K was early October. So she was trying to figure out, PMDD and her luteal phase
Mm-hmm.
and doing residency, because she knew it was going to be more challenging for her. So there was a good conversation, but then there were 2 doctors sitting there. There's a gynecologist and a psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really good to hear. But doesn't that give you hope too,
It
that you can have PMDD, but you can also be a talented vocalist who has this great career like that person?
mm-hmm.
Or, there are some who do go to medical school and they get through it. And so, there are professional people who have this. So I think there is hope, and not everybody has as severe a case as Christina. And by awareness, hopefully we can keep others from getting as severe a case.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we hope and pray for all the time.
And I'm sure the situations you've mentioned are the ones that stand out in your memory for good. Do you have any other memories that you can list that are the proof that you were doing hard work and it was all worth it? Like
Oh,
what stands
yes.
out in your memory throughout
Oh, well,
your
you know
process?
that the one who is the medical resident doing her residency
Mm-hmm.
last year at the dinner during the fireside chat, Sandy McDonald was here from IAPMD, so she led the chat, and that was really a treat to have her. I love her so much. Everybody loves Sandy so
Yes,
much.
that's true.
Yeah. And so anyway, she asked about when was your light bulb moment?
Mm-hmm.
And so that medical resident said, when I heard Mary Beth speak at the Women's Mental Health Conference at Yale.
Oh,
I didn't know that. I
that's
was hearing it for the first time with everybody else. And so, I just want to thank God for that opportunity to
mm-hmm.
have spoken and see that the Women's Mental Health Conference at Yale is no charge and they offer it virtually.
Mm-hmm.
And so they get lots of interesting speakers. And then there I was, the one lay person speaking. And I was just grateful that they let me do it. And so I gave my PowerPoint presentation about PMDD. And little did I know that across the country was a young woman listening,
Wow.
so we like to think that our sweet angel Christina is helping us, that this is really her mission and that we're the only parents she has, so she has to work with who we are. And
Oh, that's it.
we do
And
our best.
and you are doing an amazing job, as I keep telling
Oh,
you.
thank you.
And
Then another.
I really
Oh,
appreciate it, and thank you for
oh,
from all the PMDD warriors, I believe, from the bottom
oh,
of my
you're
heart, because I cannot imagine like life without you and your all work right now. Because I keep
oh,
following your pages and everything, and I think
oh
you
gosh.
are a treasure. You are a gift to the world.
Thank you. It's just social media. I'll want to post more. We'll be posting quite a bit from the 5K and all
Mm-hmm.
that. But
Oh, okay.
it's
Looking
just Steve
forward.
and me, doing this, and then we have this great board, dear friends who are with us, and then we have an advisory committee with other dear friends. So it's love. It really is. It's all about love
And I
and
know
our
you're
love
all
for
gonna make it.
Christina and love for people who we know are suffering and we can't stand the thought of it. The thought
Mm-hmm.
that other families are going through what we went through of wondering, what is this and where did my daughter go?
Mm-hmm.
We don't like that. If we can help, we'll do our little part,
Mm-hmm.
and we're grateful for other people who are doing their parts like you are doing. And, together we'll make a difference.
Exactly. And I know that you are already doing an amazing job and you are helping many, many people. My last of my questions would be, what are your hopes? What can you hope that can change in the society's approach towards PMDD, and what can happen, what can change for better, hopefully,
Yeah.
in the future if it comes to
Well, we've
PMDD?
already talked about the significance of family support and
Mhm.
understanding. To that, I would add, please do your own research. Please don't ask your loved one with PMDD to tell you all about it because that
True.
can be frustrating. And
Where to do research? I'm sorry to interrupt, but where to
yeah.
do our research? And we haven't mentioned still one important book, actually, from partners' point of view.
Oh, yes.
It's worth
Okay. Well, part
mentioning.
of your research would be the best book I think that there is, and that's by Erin Kinghorn, and it's called Hope.
Mhm.
And you can buy it on Amazon. And Aaron is the partners support group leader for IAPMD. Professionally, he's a dentist, but
Yes.
with his wife's permission, he wrote this book. And I give his wife so much credit. And I've never met her, but I love her so much because she allowed this book to be published because it's so personal, about her journey and their journey together with PMDD. But with Aaron being so skilled as a group leader, a support group leader, he has added skills to the book and insights, and everybody should read it, not just partners. He wrote it for partners,
Mhm.
but everyone needs to read it. Parents, those who have it, I think it'll be very eye opening and very, very helpful. And then there are other good books. And then, of course, if you just do your internet search for premenstrual dysphoric disorder or simply put in PMDD, you will see lots of different things come up.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So iapmd.org is, I would say, just the best place to go is just quite the library of all things PMDD. So that would be helpful.
Related. So sorry, but coming back, like, what do we hope for the change in the society's approach and for the future of
Oh,
PMDD?
okay. More support and understanding.
Uh-huh.
I would love if someday we get to a point where um, it's not so difficult for people to talk to their employers, to go to their human resources departments and bring their doctor's notes. That is happening because in the United States it is a disability.
Uh-huh.
But one time I read in an article, you're never going to hear a woman call in sick because of her menstrual cycle. They'll
Uh-huh.
say it's something else.
Uh-huh.
But if we could have more understanding and get rid of the jokes about PMS,
Yeah.
jokes about periods, because that will only shove women underground more and more because they don't want to bring it up. They don't want to be the joke in the office that
Yeah.
people are rolling their eyes over.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And that's super frustrating. And I mentioned it very often in my
And
podcast.
yeah, we have to remember all of us are here because of the menstrual cycle.
Uh-huh.
And so if we could be in awe of the menstrual cycle, it's what it brings forth life. And, there are doctors who hesitate, and rightfully so, they hesitate to want to do surgery if someone has tried everything, because they say, oh, well, it could cut years off your life. And I heard one person say, but I would cut more years off my life because of suicide.
Uh-huh.
So maybe you're saying 5 years cut off my life, but I could cut it off by 40 years, so that's significant. So they have to consider that because Christina's surgery was denied the day before she died. So
Uh-huh.
we don't know if that was a huge psychic blow for her. And the doctor was being very rigid. And he said, well, you didn't try Lupron. Well, if we think back, that gynecologist wouldn't do Lupron. She
Uh-huh.
wanted to prove it hormonally, and she insisted on doing things her way. That
Uh-huh.
set Christina back because she didn't have any Lupron.
Uh-huh.
And so, or any form of, there are pill forms of chemical menopause too.
Uh-huh.
And so, but she didn't try chemical menopause because that doctor refused. And so I would call that hubris. It was just that doctor wanting to only do it her way and not the way a psychiatrist recommended.
Uh-huh.
Um, but so I've heard of other people who they have one suicide attempt and they have jumped over all the options and gotten to surgery because their doctor felt that once they had attempted, they're more likely to attempt again.
Uh-huh.
And so it's very dangerous. Well, the doctor for the insurance company didn't care that she had 11 attempts.
Uh-huh.
And so to me, it's outrageous. And so, she died and then the next day she's gone. And I
Uh-huh.
mean, she got denied the surgery. Pardon me, I was
Uh-huh.
saying the wrong word.
Uh-huh.
She was denied the surgery and then the next day she died. Um, so we've lived a tragedy and we don't want anybody else to live this tragedy.
Uh-huh.
So more understanding, support from employers. Not everybody works in an office, so I don't know how they can become creative to help somebody if they don't work in an office. It's easier if you work in an office because they could let you maybe take a laptop home and work from home. But if you
Uh-huh.
work in a store or a plant or somewhere, then you've got to do something else.
Uh-huh.
So maybe FMLA, intermittent, that's what we have in the United States. Is time out from work other than your vacation time, other than
Wow.
standard
Okay.
sick time. It's called something else.
Uh-huh.
So maybe other countries have something similar. I don't know.
Wait a minute.
But, it's just a work in progress. It's going to take time to move our society.
Uh-huh.
But, also the menstrual cycle is so important for your brain
Uh-huh.
and for your bones. So our menstrual cycle is very, very important. So we need to respect it instead of having jokes about it.
Uh-huh.
But
Exactly.
also I think if we think more positively about our menstrual cycle, who knows? I mean, I'm not a psychologist to know this, except that I'm thinking that if we can see the miracle of it all, somehow maybe that'll help us. And then to understand our cycles and maybe teach young girls at a young age what to expect. Follicular
Exactly.
phase, you feel more energy, you're thinking more clearly. Your luteal phase, allow yourself to rest
Uh-huh.
and take it
That's
more
important.
slowly, things like that.
Uh-huh.
That might help.
Exactly. So now I know I'm speaking from everybody listening, that I know, I'm sure that with your hard work you are making the difference, and you are making the world a better place with your effort and everything. I can't thank you enough for your time for this interview. I could talk to you forever, and I hope we can meet again for another episode. I will be happy to host you again, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for this interview and everything, Marybeth.
Thank you so much.
It was great seeing you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.